Exciting stuff ahead, as always, when we're dealing with the Pauline epistles, or as I like to think of them as the Paulinist epistles, since we don't really know who wrote them, except that they were all fans of Paul in some connection or another. And boy, are we going to see that today, the patchwork quilt nature of this stuff, at least as I interpret it. Okay, remember we had. Let's see, a big row in chapter 8 about what do you do if you're invited to a business dinner or a friendly dinner at the fellowship hall of a pagan temple. You'd have friends who weren't Christians, business associates, and you can't really afford not to go to one where, the business gang is all going to be there. So what do you do? I mean, they're serving up a nice juicy steak, and there's always the possibility that it was bought cheap at the marketplace where the priests of some pagan deity sold it because there was too much meat left over from offerings to the gods. And what were they going to do with it? I mean, they, got their own food from that, but still, there might be too much of it. They're going to throw it out. There weren't any refrigerators, so they sold it to the marketplace. Anybody could buy it. And of course, it wasn't labeled as having previously been offered to Apollo or something. So you had to take a guess. And some Christians said, wait a second, if this stuff by chance had been offered to a pagan god, doesn't that mean that if I eat it, am participating in that sacrifice? It may seem kind of, Rube Goldberg, this leads to that, leads to the other thing in an unanticipated way. But that's the way it is with religious scrupulosity. Fine points, splitting hairs. And he said, look, actually, if you just keep it to yourself and don't ask, don't tell, then what the heck? It's just meat anyway. We know that these gods don't exist. I mean, there are plenty of them around, but they're fake. They're figments of the pagan imagination. But if that is more sophisticated knowledge than some of our brethren have, and their consciences are unnecessarily sensitive, right? They're the weaker brethren because of it. Weak in faith, meaning this, right? That they're hyper scrupulous. And suppose they find out that it is offer. I mean, it's in an idol temple. It's sometimes, right? These dinners. So they see you go into that, and what are they going to think? They maybe there's, hey, Gaius, come on along. I don't know. I don't think I could do that. I don't think you should be doing it. Aren't you sacrificing and participating in idolatrous worship? Well, no. But as long as they think they are, or you are, or might be, if they go ahead anyway and just swallow their scruples, they're violating their conscience. Well, all right, I guess it's okay. But, well, somebody says something like that, they're not too confident, right? So if you invite them, oh, forget that. Come on. You are inducing them to violate their own conscience. You're causing them to stumble. That becomes the issue. You and I know, Paul says, that it's just a steak. It doesn't make any difference. It's like that episode of The Sopranos where Tony's next door neighbor, his doctor, has done him a favor, and Tony gives him a box of Cuban cigars, and he says, "Thanks." These are Cubans, aren't they? They're illegal in this country. And Tony says, they're cigars. He's just cutting to the chase like the stronger brethren in Corinth, but the doctor has qualms. But Tony induces him to abandon them. Right? That's kind of what's going on here. And so Tony says, if that is what you're doing, that becomes the issue. It's not whether there's any inherent problem with the meat. Now the problem is, are you encouraging somebody to do something against their own scruples? I mean, maybe they're superstitious, maybe they're paranoid, but nonetheless, as long as they think they're doing something wrong and you're not convincing them otherwise, you just say, "No, forget it. That's nonsense. Come on." You're inducing them to sin. I mean, not because there's anything inherently wrong with it, but because now you're making them violate their sensibilities. You shouldn't do it. Okay, well, now we're going to look at some similar and identical issues, but from another perspective, implying, I think, that we have different writers. So 9:1, am I not free to do as I please? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? By the way, most scholars think that what he means by putting it that way is that is one of the main criteria for counting as an apostle, that you've seen Jesus, whether during his lifetime, as in the book of Acts. Let's choose to replace Judas, another who has seen everything we saw from the baptism of John up till the ascension. It could mean that, but then again, we usually don't think of Paul as having done that, right? He came into the game later. So maybe he means you have to have seen a resurrection appearance, which is sort of going to be implied later in chapter 15. The list of appearances, they seem to be credentials for people being apostles. But at any rate, am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? In fact, are you not my handiwork in the Lord's service? If to others I do not count as an apostle, still indeed I count as one as far as you're concerned. For you are the authenticating mark of my apostleship. What does an apostle do? He starts churches, right? That's what I did. I started your church. Doesn't that kind of prove I'm an apostle? Verse 3, to anyone cross-examining me, this is my defense. Haven't we the right to eat and drink at our converts' expense? Haven't we the right to be accompanied by a sister wife like the rest of the apostles and the brothers of the Lord and Cephas? Oh, there's a lot in this to explain. Somebody is saying Paul can't be a real apostle because he doesn't demand compensation for his service to you. Okay, where's the grub? And because remember what Jesus says in the mission charge in the Gospels, you'll be dependent upon the largesse of those you preach to. God will provide you through them. Well, apparently somebody knows a rule like that and says, you mean Paul doesn't let you pay for his meals and such? In Acts, he doesn't. He's a tent maker professionally. He doesn't sponge off his converts, right? But they're saying if he were a real apostle, he would. The fact that he's not taking compensation from you sort of means he's got a guilty conscience, or he knows he's not the real thing. Otherwise, he'd gratefully accept your support. And so he's saying, well, let me set you straight on that one. He says, we do have the right to do that. Me and Apollos and so on. Sure we do. Similarly, don't we have the right to travel with, I think, a celibate mate? This is debated between Chrysostom and Tertullian and others. Some thought it was obviously scandalous for an apostle to be traveling around with a woman he's not married to. What do you think they're up to at night? But what they were actually doing, they said, was it was like a Catholic priest with a live-in housekeeper. Nobody really thinks he's having sex with her. No, it's just that she is consecrated to this service, and that so he won't have to deal with these mundane tasks. Remember, that's why Paul said that he is glad to be celibate, that he doesn't have to worry about domestic and family and husbandly chores. It's all right if you do, but if you want to be a full-time worker for Christ, that's going to siphon off a lot of your time. And again, it's quite legitimate, but you're going to have trouble doing that and giving all for Christ. It's just practical. And so the sister as wife thing would appear to be, yeah, I'm traveling around with a fellow Christian, a woman who is a sister in Christ, and I may even be married to her, but that's where it stops. It's purely ceremonial. That comes up in the Acts of Thomas, for instance, celibate marriage, and I think that's what was referred to in chapter 7. If you want to go ahead and actually marry your virgin, your consecrated virgin who is in effect a wife, but or let's say almost in effect, in one sense, a wife, but you're not having sex. Well, keep it up. But if you feel like, well, gee, she is right there, and I'm feeling it. Go ahead, get married, go the whole way. It's all right. You obviously don't have the gift of celibacy as I do. So go ahead. What the heck? Nothing wrong with that. And let's see. So we have that right, but we don't use it. That's his point in both cases. Verse 6. Or is it only Barnabas and I who lack the right not to engage in secular work? Because, tent maker, right? 7, whoever goes off to serve in wartime at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard without receiving a share of the grapes from it? Who shepherds a flock without receiving some of the milk from it? I'm not speaking merely from common sense. Does not the Torah itself say these things? Verse 9, as a matter of fact, in the law of Moses, it is written, you shall not muzzle an ox while it's threshing. What, do oxen matter to God? Of course not. The whole reason he says it is for our sake. It was written because of us. That's probably going a bit far, right? The plowman ought to plow with some incentive. The thresher should thresh in hope of partaking of the wheat. If, like Marx said, you don't want to alienate the laborer from the fruit of his labor, right? Verse 11, if we did the spiritual sowing among you, is it asking much for us to reap some material return from you? If others have a right to expect some share of support from you, surely it should be we who have that right. Now, this is kind of strange. He goes through this long thing defending what the critics of him are saying. Oh, it's entirely right. It's not sponging or mooching when we do this. We're not exploiting you. We're putting in a lot of work, preaching, etc. Surely you can see that we have a right to receive material compensation from those among whom we perform our spiritual labors. Well, he is setting out their case. Right? This is why apostles do this. But then he says in the middle of verse 12, but we did not avail ourselves of this right because we would rather put up with anything than place an obstacle in the path to the gospel of Christ. Now, why would you go to such lengths to justify the criticisms of your opponents and then say in a sentence, but we don't do it because we think it might look bad to outsiders? Now, that's a good reason, right? We're going above and beyond the call of duty, because if we do accept support from our congregations, somebody's going to say, oh, this guy's just exploiting them. We don't want even that as a possible objection, even though it's a slander or people just don't understand what we're doing. We don't want to place any obstacle in their path. We want them to be able to just hear our preaching and not bring up these false issues. I've just said more about it than he did. And so this makes me think that what we've just heard about the rights of the apostle and all that are by somebody who agrees with those critics. If Paul were a real apostle, surely he would do what the Torah says and what common sense says and what the Lord says, but he doesn't. And then there's immediately this, there's a good reason for that. Who goes to the trouble to outline the whole case against him to hardly render any defense against it? Makes me think it's patchwork time. Because then in verse 13, he's back to the basis for the criticism of him and Barnabas. Don't you know that those who work at priestly duties get their living from the holy place, and that those who wait on the altar share in what is offered there? Well, of course they do. That's the point of the preceding discussion of, did this meat come from a pagan altar? Yeah, that's right. They get their sustenance from what's offered there, but sometimes there's too much. 14, in the same way the Lord ordained that those who proclaim the gospel should live by the gospel. Yet I have not availed myself of any of these precedents, nor have I written these things in order to do so now. For I should prefer to die rather than to have anyone nullify my boast. Again, it just seems odd to me. It sounds like a back and forth. Rather than just stating the argument you're about to refute. So I have a sneaking hunch you've got different viewpoints represented by different scribes who tried to negate what they didn't agree with, though they were not at liberty simply to remove it. Of course, there's no way to know that. We don't have any manuscripts early enough to lack this or that part that I'm suggesting was a subsequent addition. Verse 16, it is not the preaching of the gospel of which I boast. No, I have to do that, and woe is me if I do not preach the gospel. I like that, right? You don't deserve praise for doing something you would deserve censure for not doing. You're only doing your duty, as it says in Luke. Verse 17, if I did this on my own initiative, preaching the gospel, I might be due a reward, but as it is a matter of obedience, I am more of a slave entrusted with the stewardship. What reward could I desire anyway? Simply that in preaching without charge, I may offer the gospel in such a way as to refrain from using my full rights as an apostle of the gospel. Being free of everyone, I became enslaved to everyone in order that I might gain the more. Free of everyone, he's not, his judgments, his teaching is not influenced by big money supporters. Paul, I'm a little uneasy with your stance on this. I wonder if you could tone it down a bit. Oh, you bet. Keep those checks coming. Like a politician, right? And no, he says, I'm free of that. I am not dependent. I don't have to ask anybody's permission to say what I believe needs to be said. Because I am obliged to everybody to clear the path for them to convert. I perhaps couldn't do that if, for instance, some said, Paul, you really ought to tell those dumb Gentiles they ought to get circumcised and keep the Torah, and there's some denarii in it for you if you do. Nope. My obligation is not to monetary supporters, but to the people that need my message. K20, and among the Jews, oh boy, I comported myself like a Jew. What does that mean? So as to win Jews. Among those under the Torah, I comported myself like one under the Torah, so as to gain the confidence of the Torah observant. Now, does this directly contradict what he just said? That he's not, that he doesn't know where his bread is. I'm sorry, yeah, that he knows where his bread would be buttered if he were accepting support from wealthier Christians to tailor his message to. You can imagine him saying, and by the power of Jesus Christ and his cross, you can be saved. And by the way, Eucharistic wafers taste a lot better if you use pure butter as made by a land of Lake of Galilee. How ludicrous, how grossly manipulative that would be, right? So he's saying, I don't do that. I just preach it straight. And yet immediately he turns around and says that he pretends to be a Torah observant Jew among such Jews because he doesn't want to needlessly offend them. But isn't he compromising his message? Isn't he endorsing what they do by pretending to go along with it? I think it's the same, because otherwise he's not going to get a hearing. And again, he's not selling a product. He's trying to help them. He doesn't want to set, just like he wouldn't tell Gentiles, you got to keep the Torah to be saved. That's an unnecessary stumbling block. Why put it in the path of these people? In the same way, if he's preaching to Jews, he's not going to start saying, you don't really need to keep the Torah. What? What do you mean? We're Jews. Aren't you a Jew? Of course we're going to keep it. Look, I don't want to get into that. I'm just preaching Jesus. It's a funny thing. It sounds like he is tailoring his message so as not to offend certain sensitive groups. That if he does, will hurt the effectiveness of his work. Seems odd to me. Among those under the Torah, I comported myself like one under the Torah so as to gain the confidence of the Torah observant. 21, among those without the Torah, I became as one without Torah. Not, you understand, actually being without the law of God, but still abiding by the law of Christ. So I might gain the confidence of those without Torah. But among the weak in faith, the ones who thought they still had to keep all the kosher laws, etc., I observed their scruples so as to gain the confidence of the weak. I have become everything to everyone in order that by whatever means I might gain the confidence of some. Wow. This sounds very retrospective, as if we're talking about something over and done with. And it makes me wonder if, again, this is a subsequent Paulinist saying, yeah, I know you've heard this, that he was a chameleon, but you have to understand why he did this. And let me assume the role of Paul to explain myself. Let's see here. By the way, I should give you a hint about another possible interpretation of this, that when he was with the Torah observant, he acted as if he too were a Torah observer. But when he was with the Gentiles, he didn't. Well, this is interesting. The Ebionite Jewish Christians who thought Paul was a false apostle and an antichrist, they said, "Oh yeah, he tried to keep the Torah, but it didn't work for him because he wasn't a Jew. He had never grown up observing the rules of the Torah like us natural born Jews. For us, it's like a fish in water. It's no labor for us to do it. We cherish these rules of our culture, these customs. This guy, it was alien to him. He couldn't bring himself to do it. And so then went among the Gentiles and behaved like the Gentile he was. Uh, who knows? I mean, that is very tempting as a candidate for what's going on here in the background, but I don't think he's actually advertising that. Okay, so why this chameleon like behavior? On 23, but all this I do because of the gospel, in order that I may come to share in the salvation promised by it. In other words, if he didn't take this approach and maximize the number of his converts, he wouldn't be saved? Well, I guess so. 24, don't you know that all who compete in the stadium run, but only one receives the prize? Run fast enough to win. And everyone who agonizes in any sport exercises self-mastery, and they do it for the sake of receiving a fading laurel wreath. I mean, they put that much energy in it just to get a bunch of leaves. Come on now. But we seek a crown that will never fade. That is why I run as I do, in no random direction, and why I box as I do, not wasting my punches on thin air, not shadow boxing. I'm saving it up till I get in the ring. I subject my body to a severe regimen, making it my slave, so I will never find myself having preached to others and in the end disqualified. Now, I got to admit, I suspect that verses 23 through 27, this thing about the athletic analogy, would make more sense if it was originally the continuation of chapter 7, the encretism business, the rigid control of the body so it doesn't get out of hand. To me, that makes a lot more sense if he's talking about sexual urges that you have to train yourself, if you're an encretite, to ignore. So, like Freud would probably say that, because what did he think happens to the libido? Why don't we just live like bonobo chimps having sex all the time? Well, because of what he called the libido, the life force, which on a primitive level does mean, for a male, impregnating as many females as you can. Evolution wants you to do that, so you will leave as many offspring with your traits as possible, so you get a bigger share of the next generation being your offspring, and so forth. But Freud says we don't do that. This is in his book, Civilization and Its Discontents. We'd never get anywhere if we did that. So we channel, we sublimate, we refocus that energy and put it toward building up communities and various other pursuits, individually and collectively. If we didn't have this life force, libido, then nothing else would get done. But once we learn to rechannel it, a whole lot gets done. And he's saying something very similar, it seems to me. Okay, now we're back to the eating food offered to idols, which seems to me to be a rejoinder to what he was saying in chapter 8. And rather than thinking Paul was an insane multiple personality case, rather, it seems to me, again, we have another Paulinist with a different opinion, adding his in here to, in effect, an anthology of various Pauline views. And so here we go. This is why, for God's sake, don't eat food that has previously been offered to idols. There's nothing about higher knowledge that explodes such superstitions. No. Okay, here we go. 10:1. For I do not want you to ignore the fact that our Jewish ancestors were all sheltered beneath the pillar of cloud, and all passed through the sea, the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, and all were committed to Moses through baptism in the cloud and in the sea. And all alike ate the same spiritual food, and all imbibed the same spiritual drink, for they all drank from the same spiritual rock that pursued them. What rock rolled along after them in the wilderness? Well, that was a common Jewish legendary embellishment of the text of the Pentateuch, because remember how in one story Moses speaks to the rock, and from it gushes out a stream of water, and everybody's saved from being parched. And then later on, God tells him to speak to the rock in the same circumstances, but he gets impatient and smacks it with his staff. And God is pretty upset at this minor infraction, but nonetheless, it does create another fountain for the thirsty. And so the rabbis began to say, wait a minute, was he doing this to rocks all along the way? Or mustn't there have been a single special rock that followed them in the desert? Unbelievable. And they said, oh, yeah, it is. In fact, I saw that rock one day, supposedly, because I was in Westminster Abbey, and I noticed, I was looking at the throne of King Edward the Confessor, a king who abdicated the throne to become a monk. And under the throne was a big sandstone cube, and an old gent standing next. Of course, I'm an old gent now, but back then, oh man. Geez, wait a minute. Yeah, 50 years ago. Anyway, I was standing there and he said, young man. Oh, he was an Englishman. I say, old man, young man, do you know what that is? That's the stone of Scone upon which all the kings of England were coronated. That's the stone that followed the Israelites in the wilderness. Well, supposedly, right? But better than nothing, right? And so, yeah, that's they all drank from it, he says. Okay, verse 9. No, yeah, still in verse 4. And the rock was Christ, he says. I amplify that. The rock was the counterpart to Christ. It's like typology, I think he means. That was like Christ in our day. Anyways, verse 5, still with the majority of them, God was not pleased, to put it mildly, as can be seen from the fact that their bones were left scattered in the wilderness, right? The first generation, because they were too wimpy to go in and try to conquer the promised land, which they could have done with God on their side, but they were too scared. Moses said, okay, that's it, you blew your chance. Now you're going to wander around in the desert for 40 years until you're all dead, and I will lead the next generation in, right? So they all died there of old age, I guess. Yeah, 6. Now, these things were our own counterparts to warn us not to yearn for evil things as those people did. They were always griping and complaining. Yeah, I'm sick of this damn manna. Don't you have any pizza? Verse 7, and you must refuse to be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and to drink and got up to revel. That's the golden calf story. Neither let us indulge in prostitution, as some of them indulged in cult prostitution, and 23,000 fell in a single day, Numbers 25, 1 through 18, when they were invited to this huge festival at Baal Peor, and it involved an orgy, and they said, well, don't mind if I do. Neither let us indulge. Oh, yeah, I did that. Verse 9. Neither let us push the Lord's patience over the limit, as some of them did, and were destroyed by serpents. Ouch. Neither must you grouse, as some of them groused and were destroyed by the destroyer, the destroying angel, in Numbers 16:41 through 50. Compare Exodus 12:23, where this is the angel that went around killing all the Egyptian firstborn. Verse 11. Now these things befell these people paradigmatically, and were recorded to provide admonition for future readers like us, whom the cusp of the ages has overtaken. Like we're right at the end of one age and the beginning of the other. That sounds kind of exaggerated at first. You mean this was only written down so we would read it? Well, of course. Of course, that's why they wrote this stuff down to serve as a cautionary tale, right? There's nothing spooky about that. 12. So whoever thinks he stands, let him watch out that he does not fall. Oh, yeah, I'd never be caught doing that. Oh, yeah, they didn't think so either. 13, no trial has beset you that is beyond human capacity. No, God is reliable. He will not allow you to be tested beyond the breaking point. With every test, he will also provide an escape route so you will be able to endure it. Now, is that just wishful thinking? Or is it like Batman, who on one episode of the cartoon found himself in a sealed room and he says, there must be a way out of this, and on that assumption, I am going to find it. Well, that's because if you give up, there's no way you're going to find it. You might be wrong, but that in this case it may be foolproof. But if you assume that, and it isn't foolproof, well, you just made a fool of yourself, buddy. Okay, but here's the third possibility: is this legitimating suicide? The Pauline epistles are awash in Stoicism, and the Stoics believe that if you were cornered in some terrible situation, suicide's an allowable way out of it. That'd be just like Saul, right? At the end of 1 Samuel, he's defeated by the Philistines, and he knows what's going to happen once they capture him. He's going to be tortured to death, mocked, and so forth. Why not avoid that if I'm going to wind up dead anyway? So he kills himself. Is that what it's saying? I don't know. It could well be. I mean, it would make sense. I don't want to encourage anybody to commit suicide. I'm not trying to do that. But in all honesty, I have to say that is a viable interpretation. 14, for this reason, my beloved ones, abandon idolatry. I assume I am writing to people with some sense. Draw your own conclusion. The sacred cup that we consecrate, is it not a sharing in the blood of Christ? Whoops, transubstantiation? Maybe. The bread we break, is it not a sharing in the body of Christ? Transubstantiation? Could be. Because the bread is a single loaf, we, the many, are made one body. Because we all share in the one loaf of bread. I remember before I became pastor of First Baptist of Montclair, there, of course, in Montclair and Upper Montclair, there were plenty of sophisticated progressives. And being a Baptist church, they didn't have communion wafers. They just had cubed, sliced bread, and they traditionally had chopped up cubes of white bread. But some said, oh, that's not healthy enough. We need the option of wheat bread. So let's have both kinds of bread cubes on the plate as we pass it around. No, that's bad liturgical theology. The point of all sharing the loaf is that we're one body, but you're saying we're two different ones. Those who are more concerned for good health and those who aren't, as if this amount of white bread's going to kill you. They utterly miss the point of this. Yeah. 18. Consider ethnic Israel. Are not those who eat the sacrifice sharers in the altar? So, what am I trying to say? That it is anything more than a charade when a sacrifice is offered to idols? Or that there is any reality to an idol? Well, you expect him to say what he did in chapter 8. Of course not. It's just figments of the imagination. Don't worry, go ahead and eat it. But no, he draws the opposite conclusion. 20, rather, that what the benighted pagans sacrifice, they are offering to demons, not to God. And I do not want you to become table companions with demons. Hey, Captain Beelzy, long time no see. You cannot drink a cup of the Lord and a cup of demons. You cannot partake of a table of the Lord and a table of demons. And by the way, they refer to the sacramental altar of the mystery religion deities, the kurioi, the lords, as the table of the Lord also. There's a dinner invitation that survives, an old piece of papyrus, a party invitation. Come dine with me at the table of the Lord Serapis on so-and-so date. Or do 22, or do we propose to make the Lord jealous? Can we possibly manipulate him? So if you were eating food, drinking wine that had been dedicated to a demon, God is going to get plenty steamed. Why jealousy? Well, remember in the Old Testament, it said that Israel was whoring after the gods of the heathen. It's like God is the spouse of his people. And if you start worshiping other gods, you're cheating on them. 23. Well, by the way, Winsome Monroe makes chapter 10, verse 23, which we're about to read, through chapter 11, verse 29, and then 33 through 34, parts of the pastoral stratum. Let's examine it in that light. 23, all things are permitted me, but not everything is smart to do. Everything is permitted, but not everything is constructive. Let no one look out for his own interests alone, but also the good of others. Sorry about this. Verse 25, now you see what he said in up to this point in this chapter. Oh yeah, the weaker brethren are not weaker at all. They're smarter than you. They seem to understand you're partaking of demons if you do this. You don't want to do that. This is diametrically opposite to what it said in chapter 8. Okay, anyway, now we seem to be back to the other standpoint. This is interesting. All things are permitted me, like the Gnostics, right? This is addressing them. I think, oh, I can do as I please now that I'm out from under the delusion that I had to keep the commandments of the archons when I thought they were from God. And I can do whatever I want. The body is immaterial. It just doesn't matter what you do with it. That may be true, it says here, but don't be an idiot. Surely you can see that certain things you do with your body can kick back on you. Some things are just damn stupid to do because of the foreseeable results. It's not a question of who gave you the command or that it's a command at all. Don't you see? Certain things are destructive. There's no point in doing them. Okay, 24, let no one look out for his own interests alone, but also the good of others. For conscience sake, eat whatever is sold in the marketplace without asking questions about where it came from. For ultimately, it comes from the Lord in any case, as he owns the whole earth and its bounty. 27, if any unbelievers invite some of you to dinner and you are inclined to go, feel free to eat everything they serve you without asking the questions of an over scrupulous conscience. But if anyone remarks, this is sacrificial meat, decline to eat it, both because of the man who pointed it out and for the sake of conscience. Not one's own conscience, mind you, but that of the other. Now, who we talking about here? Who's the other? Well, either the pagan host, who mustn't be allowed to think by your eating this after he said that it's all the same to you. You don't mind eating a hand-me-down sacrifice from a God you claim not to believe in. Or does it mean one's Christian companion, somebody who's also been invited, whose tender conscience may be confused? I'm guessing it's the latter. In any case, the point is, as long as nobody says anything, it's just meat. It's just a meal, and there's no problem. But you see, you're back to the reason you're not supposed to say anything because of the other guy. I mean, it's a pagan sacrifice. Hey, you and I aren't supposed to eat this, are you? Well, I know there's nothing to this, but for your sake, I'll just have salad. It's the same thing as in chapter 8, very different than in chapter 10 up to this point, right? Demons, right? Continuing in verse 29, but why should my freedom be condemned by the conscience of another? Why isn't it just his problem? If I partake offering thanks, why should what I am giving thanks for expose me to denunciations? I'm free to do it all right, but it's hardly worth it. Let's see here. Yeah. So whether you're eating or drinking, whatever you may do, do everything as worship offered to God, very much like Bhakti mysticism in India. Learn not to give needless offense either to Jews or to Greeks or to the congregation of God, just as I also try to get along with everyone in every matter by not pursuing my own advantage, but that of the many, in order that they may be saved. Now, this harks back to, if when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Like if I'm among Jewish Torah observers, I will go along with them. But if I'm with non-Torah ex-pagan Greeks, I'll go along with them, because to me it really doesn't matter. I'm just trying not to uh, erect unnecessary barriers. That probably is the best solution to the problem we saw there. Is he being unduly influenced by the biases of some for the benefit of his own preaching, as if he were to modify the content of his message to please contributors? It isn't quite the same thing. Okay. Uh, yeah, 33. Just as I also try to get along with everyone in every matter, am I not pursuing my own advantage, but that of the many, in order that they may be saved? Imitate me in this policy as I am imitating Christ. Okay, I want to stop there. So I know that's kind of choppy, but that is the point, right? That it looks to me like there is back and forth between different scribes who don't like what either Paul or the original pseudepigraphist or the previous scribe has added to contradict what was just said. So that's what I think's going on. Plus, one thing doesn't really follow from another, like the thing I uh, rigidly discipline my body daily, so I don't wind up losing the race or losing the fight. That seems to me to really originally be a piece of the chapter 7 material about continence and so forth. It's Yikes. It is a bit of a mess, but this is a perfect example of what I'm saying that Darrell Dowdy taught me, to view the epistle text like it was the text of a synoptic gospel, a patchwork of things that may be on the same topic, but may be different opinions that have simply been stitched together here. Sounds that way to me. Well, what kind of comments have we? Okay. My dog Rex says, just as gods are figments, so are kings, presidents, governors, mayors, officers. That's right. It's a social contract. It's like Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman say, the social construction of reality. We say they all have authority from God, as in Romans 12, right? But we say that to give gravity to it, to hide the fact that really we made that stuff up, and that you should be able to see it's in your own interest to keep the laws that officials that we elect have passed. Yes, it's all made up by humans like us, but it's to our benefit. So, why don't you obey them? Now, you may say, what? It's only humans? I'm not. I'm a human too. I'll do what I want. No, don't you see? Look at the big picture. If it's open season on robbery, well, you can steal from other people, but people will be stealing from you. Don't you see? It's better not to have robbery for you, not just everybody else. Um, yeah, let's see. Steven says, hi, folks. Yep. Okay. And Chris Marsh, likewise, and Lloyds of London, too. All friendly folks. Um, um, Okay, I am feeling a little under par. We've nearly reached the hour mark. I think I'm going to bid you adieu. And it's uh, at 6 this evening, though I will be elsewhere. My docetic image will appear on the Bible Geek, where I will share with you something I wrote years ago and I'm pretty proud of, and is germane to our topic here, called The Psychological Basis of Biblicism. So I'll be seeing you then, or you'll be seeing me then.